The knock on my door was polite, but I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw them. Sarah, my mother, and Mark, her husband. Hadn't seen either of them in over a decade. My stomach knotted. There was no good reason for them to be here, not after all this time. I opened the door just a crack, not inviting them in, but they just pushed past me. Right into my house. My home. Mark wasted no time. "Heard about your promotion," he said, looking around my living room, taking in the space I'd built for myself. "Took you long enough to make something of yourself." "No, hello." "No, how have you been?" Just that backhanded jab, thinly disguised as a compliment. Before I could even respond, Sarah jumped in. "Ethan and Owen need help with college expenses. Things have gotten tight, Alex. Since you're doing so well now, we figured you could help out." I stood there for a long moment, just processing. Over a decade of silence. Over a decade of being completely cut off. And now, they had the nerve to show up at my doorstep, demanding money? The sheer audacity of these people. I crossed my arms, leaned against the wall, trying to project a calmness I didn't entirely feel. "You've got about 30 seconds to get out of my house before I make you leave." Mark scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. You're making good money now. No wife, no kids draining your resources. You've clearly got money sitting there. Stop acting like you can't afford to help your own brothers." "My brothers?" I let out a humorless laugh. "Those kids have nothing to do with me. You made that crystal clear when you kicked me out and threatened to lie to the cops about me. Remember that?" Sarah's face tightened. "Oh, great. Poor you. We made a difficult decision when you were younger. Get over it already. Look at you now. You turned out fine." "Yeah," I said, my voice dropping, growing colder. "No thanks to either of you. I worked my way through college with zero help from you. I made it happen in spite of you, not because of you. So, let me make this simple for both of you. The answer is no. Not a dollar, not a dime. You're not getting anything from me." Mark stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me. "Maybe you should be thanking us. If we hadn't pushed you out, you probably wouldn't be where you are today. We did you a favor. The least you can do is help your family when we need it." I straightened up, met his eyes directly, didn't back up an inch. "Thanking you? You accused your stepson of inappropriate behavior with children to justify throwing him out. You threatened to lie to the cops. Made those kids think I'd hurt them when I was trying to help. And now you want me to bail out your perfect family? That's rich. It was 20 years ago. My mom, Sarah, was just 19 when she had me. My biological father vanished the second he heard pregnant. We lived over Grandpa George and Grandma Helen's garage while she finished nursing school. She worked nonstop, but it was Grandpa George who really raised me. He taught me how to work, how to fix things, how to stand my ground. He was my rock. When I was 8, Sarah met Mark at the hospital. He was a family therapist, psychology degree, good money, good image. They married when I was 11, and we moved into his 4-bedroom colonial. Mark wasn't openly cruel, but he treated me like I was just furniture. Dinners became these long, future-focused conversations between him and Sarah, where I'd just get a nod, then ignored. Then, when I was 12, Sarah got pregnant with twins, Ethan and Owen. Her pregnancy was rough. So, I started running the house. Laundry, meals, mowing, kept my grades up. I thought being useful, being indispensable, would secure my spot. When the twins were born, everyone lost their minds. Relatives swarmed. Mark took time off. The house became non-stop baby mode. And I basically got erased. Not busy parent erased. She literally stopped seeing me. So I did what kids do when they think love is earned. I tried harder. Straight A's, chores, staying quiet, staying invisible. Turns out, you can't perform your way into being wanted. For 4 years, I existed in that house, but barely. By the time I was 16 and the twins were 4, I was a master at disappearing. Mark would talk about my boys, Ethan and Owen, like they were the only kids on earth. My boys needed this. My boys were doing that. Never the kids, never the family including me. Kind of ironic for a guy paid to help families communicate. My birthday? If they remembered, it was a gas station gift card and a wrinkled $20 bill. The twins' birthdays were productions, bounce house, face painter, a swarm of preschoolers wrecking the yard, Mark grilling like it was a televised event, Sarah flooding social media with pictures of her precious boys. I stopped expecting anything. I focused on school, worked weekends at an auto shop, saved every dollar because my gut told me I'd need an exit. My gut was right. I just didn't realize how soon. One Tuesday evening in October, junior year of high school, I got home from my shift at the shop around 6 o'clock. Sarah and Mark had gone to some work function. The babysitter had canceled last minute, so they decided I was old enough to watch the twins for a couple hours. First time they'd ever trusted me with that. I was actually looking forward to it. Thought maybe this was a sign they were starting to see me as part of the family again. The twins were watching cartoons when I got home. Everything seemed fine. Then, around 7:30, Owen started getting fussy. Ethan joined in. Both of them crying, saying they wanted Sarah. I tried everything. Offered snacks, put on their favorite show, suggested building with blocks. Nothing worked. They just kept crying louder. Ethan was working himself into a full meltdown, that kind where kids can't catch their breath. I picked him up, held him on my hip the way I'd seen Sarah do 100 times. Bounced him a little, told him it was okay, Sarah would be home soon. Just trying to calm him down before he made himself sick. That's when I heard the front door open. Sarah and Mark walked in. The scene they saw was me holding a distraught Ethan, with Owen still crying on the couch. Before I could explain, before I could say anything, Sarah's face went from concern to pure rage in about half a second. She crossed the room fast and practically ripped Ethan out of my arms. He was startled and cried even harder. "What did you do to them?" she demanded, checking Ethan over like I'd harmed him. "Nothing. They just wanted you." I was trying to calm him down. The slap came out of nowhere. Hard enough that my head snapped to the side and my ear started ringing. I just stood there, stunned, my hand going to my face. "Don't you ever touch them," she hissed. Mark stepped between us, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. Not concern, not confusion. Disgust. "Why would you touch my kids?" His voice was cold, clinical, the same tone he probably used with patients he'd already written off. "What's wrong with you?" They were crying. You were supposed to watch them, not put your hands on them." He moved closer, crowding into my space. I knew this was a mistake. I knew we couldn't trust you around them. Something in me snapped. For years of being invisible, being treated like I didn't matter. And now this. I shoved him back. Not hard. Just enough to get him out of my face. "Back off." I didn't do anything wrong. Mark grabbed my shirt, pulled me close. "You stinky little piece of trash. You put your filthy hands on my boy." "You're done here, Mark," Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. "Get him out. Get him out of this house right now. You're insane." I yelled, looking at both of them. "I was watching them like you asked." They got upset. I was trying to help. Sarah's face twisted into something ugly. "No one will ever love you. You're going to die alone and miserable, and you'll deserve it. The words hit harder than the slap. I just stared at her, at this woman who was supposed to be my mother, and saw nothing but hatred. Mark dragged me toward the door. Get your stuff and get out. You've got 20 minutes before I call the police and tell them you assaulted me and did something inappropriate with those boys. That threat stopped me cold. I looked at Sarah, waiting for her to say something, to tell him he was being crazy. She just stood there, holding Ethan, her expression blank. I went to my room in a daze, grabbed 2 duffel bags, and started throwing things in. Clothes, laptop, school books, the box of photos with Grandpa George. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely zip the bags. I kept replaying what just happened, trying to make sense of it. 15 minutes later, I walked past them on my way out. They were sitting in the living room with the twins, who had already calmed down. Probably forgot what they'd even been crying about. I stopped at the door, turned back. You're both sick. And you're going to regret this. Mark smirked. The only regret here is that we wasted 16 years on you. Your own mom thinks you're a waste of space. Then he laughed. Good luck finding someone who will care about you. I walked the 1.5 miles to Grandpa George and Grandma Helen's house in the dark. Those duffel bags cut into my shoulders the whole way. My face still stung where she'd slapped me. My ear was still ringing. But what hurt most was knowing that after 16 years, that's what I was worth to her. An accusation and 20 minutes to pack. Grandpa George opened the door, took one look at me standing there with my bags and my face red from the slap, and his expression went hard. What happened? I told him everything. The twins crying, me trying to help. The accusation, the slap, the threats. I watched his face get darker with every sentence. That's it, he said quietly. We're done with her. Grandma Helen appeared behind him, saw me, and immediately pulled me inside. She was crying before I even finished explaining. She hit you? Her own son. She's made her choice, Grandpa George said, putting his hand on my shoulder. And we've made ours. You're ours now. Not just for tonight. For good. That first night in the spare bedroom, staring at the ceiling, something clicked. I was done with her. Done hoping she'd remember I existed. Done waiting for her to pick me. It was just me now. And honestly, it felt good to know where I stood. My grandparents didn't just give me a roof and food. They went to war for me. Within 2 days, Grandpa George contacted a lawyer about guardianship. Sarah voluntarily signed temporary custody papers without even asking to talk to me first. Probably wanted to avoid Child Protective Services or the police looking into what really happened that night. By the end of the week, I was legally under their care. They cut her off completely. Grandpa George wanted to file a police report about Mark's threats, but the lawyer advised against it. Said getting custody secured first was priority, and a he-said-she-said situation might drag things out or make Sarah fight the guardianship. Better to get me safe than deal with consequences later. They changed their wills, stopped taking her calls, told her she was dead to them. When relatives asked what happened, Grandpa George told them the truth. She hit our grandson, kicked him out, and accused him of things he didn't do to justify it. We're done. For the next 2 years, I worked 20 to 25 hours a week at the local hardware store. That money covered school supplies, clothes, and gas for the beat-up car Grandpa George handed down. My grades slid from straight A's to mostly B's, but I still finished with a 3.6. Good enough. Sarah stayed silent. No texts, no calls, nothing for birthdays, holidays, graduation. I'd just hear about their newer cars, the twins' big parties, weekend beach trips. Funny how inappropriate behavior concerns vanished the second I wasn't their financial burden anymore. Senior year, I got into a few schools. Even with scholarships, I needed loans, which meant an adult cosigner. I mentioned it at dinner with my grandparents, and my Aunt Carol didn't blink. She said she'd co-sign. I tried to argue, she shut it down. She'd watched me grind since I got thrown out, and she wasn't letting me lose college over my mother. College was brutal. I worked campus jobs, pulled weekend overnights at a warehouse, did odd jobs, taught myself basic CAD and freelance drawings for small contractors. Sleep was optional. Sarah stayed silent. I'd occasionally see her perfect family posts to relatives and finally blocked her. Not my hobby. For years later, I invited Aunt Carol to graduation. She showed up early and cheered like it was her win, too. Sarah didn't even know I was graduating. I didn't tell her. After graduation, I landed an entry-level project coordinator role at a commercial construction firm a couple hours away in a neighboring state. Started at $38,000, moved into a tiny studio, lived cheap, and worked like my job was the only thing keeping the lights on. I learned everything, took extra assignments, and kept leveling up. By my mid-20s, I'd paid down most of my loans and started saving seriously. At 26, I found a foreclosed 3-bedroom house that needed work. Got it for cheap. Spent nights and weekends fixing it up myself. Everything Grandpa George taught me finally paid off. Took out a small mortgage to close the deal, but the monthly payments were manageable. By my late 20s, I'd built real savings and had that decent place mostly renovated. Sarah and I stayed no contact. Then, around 30, I got promoted to senior PM and jumped from $75,000 to $140,000. The raise was massive. Within 3 years, I paid off the mortgage completely and stacked my savings even higher. I kept it quiet. The only person I told was Aunt Carol. She mentioned it at a family gathering, hoping it might thaw things. That's what lit the fuse. Back to the present, back to Sarah and Mark in my living room, after all those years. Sarah's voice went sharp. You're being selfish. I raised you alone. Worked my tail off to keep you alive. Now you've got everything and we're asking for a little help for your siblings. You owe them at least that much. I don't owe them anything, I said firmly. You made specific choices about me. Decided I wasn't worth your time, attention, or money. That's on you. I'm not putting my life on hold or my money at risk for kids you convinced I was dangerous around. The logic doesn't add up, does it? If I was such a threat back then, why would you want me helping them now? Mark's face went red. You know what your problem is? You've always been bitter. Always thought you were special. You think you're better than your family just because you got a decent job. But let me tell you something. You didn't mean anything to this family back then, and you don't mean anything now. I just smiled. Then why are you here? If I don't mean anything, why are you begging me for money? Sounds desperate. Sounds like you need me more than I need you. Sarah snapped. Because we didn't want to come here. Do you think we enjoy asking you for help? But Ethan and Owen deserve a future. And if you weren't so selfish, you'd see that. They deserve better parents who didn't make terrible choices, I said calmly. That's not my problem. Now, get out of my house. Mark pointed at my face, voice rising. You better watch your mouth. We're still your family whether you like it or not. I stepped forward now, getting right in his space. I watched him instinctively take a half step back. Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't slap their kid, accuse them of horrible things, and throw them out with 20 minutes to pack. You're not my family. You're just strangers who showed up thinking you could guilt-trip me into solving problems you created. It's not happening. Sarah's face twisted. Fine, be a selfish brat. But don't come crying to us when your perfect life falls apart. You think you're so much better than everyone, but you're nothing special. You'll always be nothing. Just like I told you that night, no one will ever love you. You'll die alone. If that's true, I said quietly, at least I'll die knowing I didn't become like you. Now, for the last time, get out. Go ahead, Mark said, trying to reclaim some ground. Call the police. See how that looks? Calling the police on your own parents. I pulled out my phone. Already dialing. You're not my parents. You lost that right when you hit me and threw me out. You've got 10 seconds before these officers arrive to remove trespassers. Sarah grabbed Mark's arm. This isn't over, she hissed at me. You're going to regret this. Everyone's going to see what kind of person you really are. No, I said, holding the door open, phone still to my ear. Everyone's going to see what kind of people you really are. I promise you that. They left. I gave the dispatcher my address and explained the situation. They sent an officer to take a report. I documented everything. That confrontation wasn't just satisfying. It told me everything I needed to know. They'd shown up thinking they could manipulate me, guilt me, intimidate me. Instead, they'd walked into a man who'd spent over a decade building himself into someone they couldn't touch. Someone who didn't need their approval, love, or recognition. Someone who was finally ready to go nuclear. I thought that confrontation would be the end of it. Should have known they wouldn't give up that easily. A couple weeks later, I found out from concerned coworkers that Sarah had shown up at my office. I'd taken a sick day, which probably saved me from a worse scene. But according to what people told me, she marched into the lobby of our secured commercial building, demanded loudly to speak with me, and when security informed her I wasn't there, she refused to leave. Started shouting about family obligations and sacrifices and how ungrateful I was, getting aggressive. Building security eventually had to physically escort her out and off the property. Several coworkers witnessed the whole thing. It was embarrassing as hell. The next day at work felt awful. I apologized to everyone who'd seen that nightmare. Went straight to HR, explained the situation, had them add her name to the official list of people not allowed on company premises, put her photo on file with building security. The whole thing was embarrassing, but she still wasn't done. That same week, I got home from work and found her waiting outside my house, pacing up and down my driveway, clearly agitated. The second I got out of my truck with my work bag, she stormed over. You can't keep ignoring me. We need to talk about this right now. I kept my distance, keys in my hand. What are you doing here? I told you we're done. We need to have a real conversation. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities to your brothers. What responsibilities? You're the parent. Ethan and Owen are your kids, not mine. Figure it out yourself. That set her off completely. She started screaming about how selfish and ungrateful I was. How I owed her everything for raising me alone. I sacrificed everything for you, she shouted. And this is how you repay me? You didn't sacrifice anything for me. Go home. Don't show up here again. Her voice went from loud to hysterical. She started yelling so loudly that neighbors began coming out to see what was happening. He's a brat, she screamed, gesturing at me. Always been selfish. Doesn't care about anyone but himself. Several neighbors tried to calm her down, but she was way past hearing anyone. Then she actually lunged at me, still screaming. Stay back! I warned, already dialing 911. Don't you dare call the police on your own mother, she shrieked, trying to grab the phone from my hands. I raised you. I said loudly, holding the phone away. Threw me away like garbage. One of my neighbors yelled that he was also calling the police. Another physically stepped in and pulled her back. By that point, sirens were already cutting through the evening air. The responding officers separated us, took statements from me and multiple witnesses. Sarah tried to play the victim, crying about how I'd turned my back on my struggling family. But 3 neighbors had seen her lunge at me, heard her screaming. One had even started recording on his phone. The officers didn't arrest her, treated it like a family dispute, separated us, gave her a stern warning, documented everything, and told me I should get a restraining order if this continued. Classic domestic call response. They filed the incident report and left. She sat in her car at the end of the street for another hour before driving away. But that incident was the push I needed. Because while she was sitting in her car that night, I was inside my house making a decision. Time to find out exactly why they were really broke, and make sure everyone knew the truth. Next morning, I took time off work and went to the police station. Filed for the restraining order based on the workplace incident and the driveway confrontation. The officer who'd responded the night before had filed a detailed report with witness statements, which helped move things along. But before the hearing, I did my homework. I wanted to know exactly what had destroyed their finances. 2 nurses making decent money don't go from comfortable to desperate overnight. I started with Mark's professional license. Public records are public for a reason. The state licensing board website had everything laid out. License suspended pending investigation. Formal complaint filed by 3 former clients. Ethics violations, including inappropriate dual relationships, boundary violations, and improper termination of therapeutic relationships. The details were clinical, but damning. I kept digging. Found the civil lawsuits next. Mark being sued by 2 former patients for emotional distress and malpractice. One case involved him developing a personal relationship with a vulnerable client and then abruptly ending therapy when it got complicated. Another involved him taking on a client while simultaneously having a social relationship with that client's ex-spouse. Basic ethics violations that any first-year therapist knows to avoid. But it got worse. Found allegations in court filings about a federal audit. Medicaid and Medicare fraud investigation, with claims Mark had been billing for sessions that never happened. Billing couples therapy when only one person attended. Upcoding session types to get higher reimbursements. Public docket entries laid it out. Systematic billing issues that don't happen by accident. The hospital cut ties with him immediately when the investigation started. His malpractice insurance dropped him. He was looking at potential criminal charges, massive civil penalties, and complete financial ruin. The man who made his living telling people how to fix their lives couldn't follow basic professional ethics. The hypocrisy was almost funny, if it wasn't so pathetic. A family therapist who specialized in helping families communicate and maintain boundaries, who'd built his career on professional ethics and helping vulnerable people, had systematically violated every rule in the book. And the same man who'd accused his teenage stepson of inappropriate behavior with children had been engaging in inappropriate relationships with vulnerable adult clients. I compiled everything. Every board action, every lawsuit, every audit notice. Public records, anyone could verify. When I told Grandpa George and Grandma Helen everything, they were furious. "She's lost her mind," Grandpa George said, shaking his head. "Coming after you like this while her husband destroys everything through his own choices." Grandma Helen's voice was heavy with disgust. A therapist, someone people trusted to help them, and he was using them like that. Sick. "They deserve each other," I said. "And they're going to get exactly what they deserve." The restraining order hearing came about 3 weeks later. The judge reviewed the police reports, witness statements, and documented harassment pattern. Sarah showed up with some story about being a concerned parent. Tried the tears, but the evidence spoke louder than her performance. The judge granted a 3-year order without much deliberation. After the order went into effect, the direct harassment stopped. No more showing up at my work or house, but she found workarounds. Started calling me from different numbers. Blocked every single one. Sent letters to my house that went straight into my documentation folder. Got relatives to reach out on her behalf with messages about how she just wanted to talk and work things out. I shut that down immediately, told them I had no interest in reconciliation and they needed to stop carrying her messages. Most family members backed off after that. She even tried showing up at my grandparents' house a few times, demanding they make me see reason. My grandparents called her out hard every time, told her to leave and never come back. When she refused the third time, Grandpa George called the police himself. They gave her a citation for trespassing and reminded her about the restraining order. Coming to my grandparents' house to harass them about me counted as indirect contact. That finally got her to back off for a while. Life finally started looking normal again. I threw myself into work, my house, and the people who actually mattered. My grandparents, Aunt Carol, a couple close friends. I installed security cameras, kept my documentation folder updated, and focused on moving forward. A few months after things quieted down, I started taking care of the people who'd taken care of me. First were my grandparents. I paid for the new roof they'd been putting off, covered their property taxes for the year, and set up a medical fund so they'd never have to stress about bills again. They tried to refuse. I told them it wasn't negotiable. They gave me everything when I had nothing. Aunt Carol was next. I didn't want to just repay her. I wanted her to feel what she did for me. So, I planned a long weekend trip to the Grand Canyon for her whole family. Something she'd talked about for years but never did because she was always putting everyone else first. I covered flights, a decent hotel, and gave her spending money for food and activities so she could actually enjoy it without doing mental math the whole time. When I handed her the envelope, she opened it and just froze. "What is this?" "It's for you," I told her. "You showed up when nobody else did. You deserve something good." She started shaking her head, saying she didn't help me for anything back. I told her that was the point. She hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. And for the first time in a long time, I felt what it's like to be valued instead of tolerated. Of course, word got around fast. Aunt Carol was excited and told family. Within days, it got back to Sarah, and she lost her mind. She started calling from new numbers, leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails about how I could afford vacations and gifts, but wouldn't pay for my brother's college. Accusing me of rubbing my success in her face, asking how I could give money to anyone else when family was struggling. Every voicemail went straight into the documentation folder. Ethan and Owen started reaching out too, probably through relatives or Sarah handing them my number. Same energy. Not humble, not sincere, just entitled, bitter, jealous. Why was I playing favorites with Aunt Carol? Why did I think I was too good for them? Why was I being petty? I didn't reply. I saved everything. And that was the last straw. I'd been patient. I'd documented the harassment. And I'd given them every chance to back off. They didn't. So, I decided it was time to make sure everyone knew exactly who they were and what they'd done. I started by writing everything out. Not an emotional rant, just a clean timeline with receipts. The night I was 16, the twins crying, me trying to help, the slap, the accusations, the threats. The decade of silence. Then Sarah and Mark showing up demanding money. After that, the workplace scene, the driveway incident, the restraining order, and Ethan and Owen's entitled messages. The real leverage was Mark's professional collapse. I didn't vaguely reference it. I linked the state licensing board documents showing his suspended license, included redacted excerpts from the ethics complaints showing the pattern of boundary violations in dual relationships, and attached links to the civil lawsuits and fraud. Investigation. All public record. All verifiable. The story basically wrote itself. A family therapist obsessed with ethics and boundaries, violating the rules for years. The same guy who accused his teenage stepson of being inappropriate, then threw him out with threats. And once the consequences hit, they came looking for money from the kid they discarded. I didn't post it publicly. That would have been messy. I sent it directly to the family members who mattered and who Sarah had been working for sympathy. My grandparents, siblings, cousins, key people in the extended family. Every claim backed by documents, public records, and screenshots. I attached one note, asterisk since there's confusion, here's the timeline with documentation. Draw your own conclusions. Asterisk the reaction wasn't instant because real family drama isn't a movie. Over the next few weeks, relatives reached out privately to apologize for buying her version. A few admitted they'd been considering helping her financially and were glad they saw the truth first. Others were disgusted by Mark's violations, especially the ones who had connections to the mental health world or knew people who'd seen him as a therapist. That's where it really hurt. Word spread through his former colleagues and professional network. The reputation he'd spent his life polishing didn't just crack, it caved in. He went from respected professional to that therapist. Some older relatives tried to play mediator with the usual forgiveness speeches and family loyalty guilt. I shut it down immediately, told them I appreciated the concern, but the conversation was closed. They could have whatever relationship they wanted with her. I was done. After that, it spread quietly. Private calls, side conversations, people making up their own minds. Sarah's support network started shrinking. Aunt Carol told me relatives stopped returning her calls. Made excuses when she tried to set things up or just went silent. The cousins who used to help with money and favors suddenly had their own problems. Sarah tried to claim I'd done everything and she was the victim. It didn't stick. Police reports are police reports. Court documents are court documents. Licensing board actions are public record. Her voicemails and Ethan and Owen's messages were saved verbatim. The pattern was obvious. Ethan and Owen tried defending her in the family group chat, which only made it worse because people could see the same entitled tone I'd already included. They came off exactly as they were. Kids raised to think they were owed support, confused why the brother they never treated like family wouldn't bankroll them. The best part was hearing multiple relatives say they'd been close to helping Sarah and the twins financially before they saw the packet. After they did, those doors slammed shut. She'd been working the family for money, and I killed that plan. The fallout wasn't some dramatic explosion. It was just done. Invitations stopped. People were busy. Her usual circle pulled back in slow motion. Then Mark's situation got worse. One of the civil lawsuits went to trial. Testimony dragged out years of ethics violations and manipulative behavior with vulnerable clients, including using his position to start inappropriate relationships. He lost badly. The judgment was big enough. They had to sell the house. The 4-bedroom colonial he'd inherited and never paid for was gone. They ended up in a 2-bedroom apartment in a worse part of town. Sarah was working double shifts to cover rent and legal fees. Ethan and Owen were working fast food because they'd burned through connections trying to land better opportunities. And being tied to a disgraced therapist didn't help. After I sent the documentation, I got about 8 months of silence. No harassment, no manipulation, nothing. I thought it was finally over. Then, on a cold Friday evening in late November, I pulled into my driveway after work and noticed a car parked across the street. Didn't think much of it at first. Neighbors have guests. But as I got out of my truck, I saw Sarah sitting in the driver's seat, watching my house. Just sitting there. Not getting out, not approaching, just watching. I grabbed my work bag, went inside through the garage, and closed the door. Pulled up my security camera feed on my phone. She was still there. 10 minutes passed, 30, still there. I called the non-emergency police line, explained the situation. Someone with a restraining order against her was parked across from my house, lingering over half an hour. She was just outside the 500-foot boundary specified in the order, but I wanted it documented. Dispatcher sent an officer to check it out. 15 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. I watched through my camera feed as the officer approached her car. They talked for maybe 5 minutes. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see her gesturing, probably explaining she was sitting in her car on a public street. The officer came to my door. I stepped out onto the porch. She says she just wants to talk to you, he said. Claims it's important. Says she has nowhere else to turn. Asked if you'd be willing to hear her out. I looked past him at the car. Saw Sarah staring at me with this desperate look I'd never seen before. Not the manipulative tears from before, just exhaustion and desperation. No, I said flatly. She had years to talk. Multiple chances to approach this differently. She made her choices. The officer nodded. That's your right. She's outside the 500-foot boundary, so technically not violating, but I'll let her know you're not interested and she needs to leave the area. He went back to her car. More conversation. I saw her slump in her seat, put her hands over her face. The officer kept talking, probably explaining she needed to leave. Finally, she started her car, but before pulling away, she got out. The officer immediately moved to intercept her, but she wasn't approaching my house. Just stood by her car door, looking at me across the street. Please, she called out, voice cracking. Just 5 minutes. We've lost everything. Mark can't work. Ethan and Owen can't finish school. We're about to be evicted. We need help. The officer positioned himself between us, told her she needed to get back in her car. You did this, she continued, voice getting louder despite the officer's warnings. You turned everyone against us. You destroyed our lives because you're bitter about decisions made years ago. We're family. You're supposed to help. I stood there on my porch, completely calm, and let her finish. The officer was getting more stern, telling her this was her last warning before he called for backup and she'd be arrested. When she finally stopped to take a breath, I spoke, my voice level, carrying across the street. I couldn't care less. Her face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Please, I'm begging you. Help us. Those are just words, I said. You had over a decade to apologize. You chose silence. Chose to only reach out when you wanted money. Chose to harass me when I said no. You don't get to call that family. The officer physically guided her back toward her car door. She was crying now, saying something about mistakes and still being my mother. How could I be so heartless when they were losing everything? Ma'am, get in your car now or you're going to jail, the officer said firmly. She finally got in, sat there for a few more seconds, just staring at me, tears streaming down her face, then drove away slowly. The officer came back to my porch. You want to file a report on this? It's borderline. She didn't technically violate the order, but the intent was clearly to contact you. Yeah, I said. File the report. I want this on record. He nodded, took my statement, and left. I went back inside, locked up, pulled out my phone. Texted Aunt Carol. Sarah showed up outside my house tonight. Police handled it. I'm fine. Her response came immediately. Need me to come over? I smiled and typed back, no, I'm good. Really good. And I sat on my couch and thought about the kid I was at 16, carrying my life in 2 duffel bags. I built everything myself. Aunt Carol and my grandparents were the only ones who showed up. I was good. What would you have done in my position?